Hi, this is Noah, the Freelance Painter, and today I want to walk you through my process for pulling, staining, finishing, and reinstalling replacement windows. A lot of people get unfinished windows from the factory, and I think a lot of people don't really know what to do, and a lot of people do the wrong thing, and a lot of people never finish them, and it turns into a problem because the wood gets wet and starts to get moldy and damaged. So today I want to walk you through my process for how to deal with all this, and I really hope to make this accessible to the homeowner and useful to the contractor alike. So I'll be covering a lot of things in this series, so if any of this interests you, please stick around. Step 1, pull the windows. If you have storms and it's not cold outside and you're not worried about security, that should probably work. If you are in Vermont in the middle of winter like I am, you need to secure the window against heat loss. So one piece of insulation, no seams, foil tape. You're going to want to create a little work area for yourself where you can work in a heated environment for several consecutive days. As you can see, I'm finishing some other trim for this kitchen in addition to all the windows. So I'm going to start with a really important concept that really is the underpinning of the next part of this process, which is sanding. I'm going to talk about mill glaze. What is mill glaze? I'm getting down here to reflect that natural light outside to show you that waxy sheen that you see. And what that comes from, this is an overcomplicated and confusing topic for some reason, but it's pretty simple. When these pieces of wood are planed down flat, and when a router or a shaper blade makes this profile, there are high-speed blades spinning over these things to form them. And what that does is it burnishes the wood and just results in this kind of waxy, sheeny, glazy layer. And stain doesn't really want to penetrate through that. Stain isn't going to show the wood's natural grain. It's not going to get the wood to the fullest potential if that mill glaze is a barrier. You will be kind of superficially staining the wood instead of letting the stain get really into it and enrich it. So that needs to come off. I'm going to show you a little example of why this is important right now. This is a very similar wood, clear pine species that was done before I got here. And as you can see, it doesn't look that great. It looks pale. And that's because the person who did this used a product called Polyshades. And what Polyshades claims to do, it's a 2-in-1 product. So within the polyurethane, there are stain pigments suspended. So they claim that you can put one coating on and it has the color and the protection. And it does. Look, it doesn't look terrible. It looks done. But there's nothing rich about this wood. And that is because this product was put on over mill glaze and the stain was suspended in the polyurethane. So it never really got a chance to get into the wood. This isn't directly apples to apples. But contrast that to this new stain that I did. Same clear pine, but I sanded that mill glaze off. I got a gel stain to penetrate into the wood. And again, it's not apples to apples because it's a different hue, but you see so much more depth there. And you see so much more depth here in this clear pine than you do in those situations where you didn't let the pigment get in the wood. So step 1 is getting rid of this mill glaze, and that is what I'm going to show next. Okay, so sanding. I'm hoping the light is okay in here. It's a choice between the blinding floodlight I have and dark Vermont winter days out there, so I chose this. Hopefully it's not too bad. So how do I sand? As a contractor, it behooves me to own some really nice sanding tools. This is the Festool LS 130, and the special thing about this is that it's a linear motion sander, so it mimics hand sanding up and down. To contrast, this is the same exact pad shape, but this is an orbital sander, meaning it's going in circular orbital motions. The reason that matters on these softwood windows is that you really need to go with the grain at all times. If you If you, on softwood, scratch against the grain, leave curly cues, and then use a dark stain, there's a really good chance that's gonna show up. And even linear sanding, if you go too aggressively, that could show up in the form of dark scratch marks. So it's really important, however you do this, to be very careful about scratch marks going with the grain. So, big picture, what I do to get the mill glaze off is I start with 120 granat with this. I get all of the mill glaze off, and then I actually hand sand everything else. For my hand sanding, I use the Festool, I buy big rolls of these Festool pads, and I pick it up at 150 and go to 180 with these pads. I'll talk about more the sanding progression and everything in the next staining video, so there will be more information there about that. But to recap, 120, get the grit off here with this powerful sander, and then 150, 180 with this to finesse it. Most of you won't have this tool, and that's okay. This is where this is gonna be the grunt work. This is gonna be the sanding that isn't fun. This stuff is kind of stubborn. Mill glaze is waxy, it's stubborn. So you're gonna have to work to get it off. You might wanna start with 100 if you're hand sanding and be careful. But you don't have to get these pads, but I do recommend some felt back pads and maybe blocks when you get into the upper grits. They're just easier to control than paper. You're also gonna wanna have a little vacuum attached, because especially if you're hand sanding the mill glaze off, it gets waxy. So you're gonna be sanding, and then you're gonna be clearing. You're gonna be clearing that paper. You really don't want to be pushing the things, the debris and the dust you're removing from the wood back into the wood. That's why Festool's dust extraction sanders are so beneficial. But again, 100, maybe 120 if you're hand sanding it off, 120 for me with this thing, 150, 180, keeping everything clean, going with the grain lines. I'm gonna show you, if you do have this, I'm gonna show you exactly what I do for my first move on this to mitigate the fact that there are perpendicular grains here intersecting. How do you keep that looking neat? How do you avoid scratch marks at the corners? I'm gonna show you my first move here. I won't bore you with me sanding the entire window here, but here's the first move. It's really important. Notice I extended past the vertical part onto the horizontal and intentionally got scratch marks on here the wrong way. I'm going to show you how to mitigate that in the next little clip. Okay, so that was the part that I just sanded. You saw a few swipes back and forth. I used 120 granat, and you can see I extended a little past this vertical part. The reason I did that is because you finish this part last and come back and erase those scratch marks that are going perpendicular to the grain. So, against the grain scratch marks. No mas. All right, now let me get in the weeds a little for this next part. If you have the LS 130, this is a really good attachment to have, the right angle one. When you fold the paper over, really crease it in the middle so that it's less of a rounded 90 and more of a sharp 90. The way that's gonna help you is around the edges right there. That's a little 90, and if you leave the mill glaze there, the stain's not going in and it's gonna look darker. It's gonna look like this weird line. Yes, I'm an obsessive, but these are the details the clients really count on. Like, this is the stuff that matters. So what you do with that, The rest of that little round over, that gets hand sanded because you never put anything like that close to the glass. But that little bit, that little run saves a lot of hand sanding and avoids there being a dark line where stain couldn't absorb around the perimeter of the window. Okay, the LS130 sanding work is done. All of my Mill Glaze is off. The wood is more open, you can just feel it. You might even be able to see less of a sheen there. I don't know. But my next step, hand sanding. Again, I'm using these felt back pads. I lied earlier, I do have to use 120 one more time, and that's on the little round over portion right there. And you really want to be careful when you do this. You're getting sandpaper close to the glass. So what I like to do is just swipes back and forth, constantly vacuuming. Remember, this stuff is sticky, it'll clog up your paper and dig into the wood. So 120 for that, and then I'm moving up the grit progression with 150 until everything is just really smooth. When you're hand sanding, you're still keeping in mind the fact that you're jutting up against perpendicular wood grain, and do the verticals first, scratch a little beyond, finish with the horizontals. So do that for every single grit progression, 150 and 180. And next I'll show you what it's supposed to look like before it's ready for stain. Here's a little close-up of wood that's not ready to stain. There's still Mill Glaze alive and well. You can see it's amber. And this, all that's gone. It's light, it's even, it's porous, it even feels different. A way to check is look against natural or artificial light. Sorry if that's a little glary, but you see the far window that's prepped better? It's dull. Over here, sheeny. So get that wood dulled, get it open, get it clean, and it can soon look like that. And that wraps up the sanding and prep portion of this video series. So if you made it this far, thanks for getting in the weeds with me and watching, and stick around for the next episode, which is going to be staining, polyurethaning, and reinstalling. Thanks for watching.